My name is Emma. I am 34 years old, and my life has been a series of simmering conflicts with my sister, Olivia. When the invitation to her wedding arrived, a small ray of hope lit up in my heart that maybe, after all these years of estrangement, we could mend what had broken us. But then, the moment Olivia strode out in her gorgeous wedding dress, I realized I was wrong. Instead of a word of thanks or forgiveness, she used the microphone to mock my body. Overweight, alone, in front of 500 eyes watching. I could only stand there, tears stinging my eyes. And at that moment, the most unexpected thing happened. Ethan, her groom, slowly stood up, took the microphone, leaned slightly towards me, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, what is about to happen will change everything." I used to be a promising violinist. Mrs. Thompson, my devoted instructor, would look at me with a bright smile during each performance, whispering about scholarships and my dream of attending a prestigious music academy. Music filled our small house in suburban New Jersey. I played for hours every day, letting my fingers dance over the strings. Olivia would sit beside me, diligently drawing jewelry designs while softly singing along to the music I played. She was my first audience, my biggest cheerleader. But all that changed when Olivia turned 13, when she became a beautiful, captivating young woman who attracted all eyes. At some point, the glow I had with the violin began to fade in the face of Olivia's growing brilliance. My mother, who had walked the catwalks before, began to focus all her attention on Olivia's journey to shine, helping her choose elegant dresses, giving her step-by-step instructions on how to apply makeup and act like a lady in a crowd. My father always tried to balance things out, patiently attending my violin performances, lavishing praise and encouragement. But no matter how hard he tried, his warm presence could not overpower the laughter between my mother and Olivia as they discussed beauty pageants or opportunities to enter the fashion world. "Emma plays the violin very well," my mother would say dismissively after the applause died down, then quickly turned to fix Olivia's stray curls or discuss the next audition. On Olivia's occasions, Mom became the cheerleader, filming every moment, pasting photos, and making meticulous notes in ornate scrapbooks. The unspoken message became clear. Olivia's accomplishments were a source of pride. My talents were merely a given. Yet throughout high school, Olivia and I remained relatively peaceful. We lived in two largely separate worlds. Olivia dazzled at proms, surrounded by admiration. I found comfort in a small group of friends who shared my passion for academics and music. We were parallel lines, rarely intersecting, except at family dinners, where Olivia led the conversation with her social exploits, and I remained silent, listening out of habit. My life took a completely different turn during my sophomore year of college. On a seemingly normal Tuesday afternoon, my mother called me. Her voice shaking, her voice frighteningly unstable. She said the doctors had discovered a malignant tumor, terminal cancer, and that immediate treatment was needed. I returned home that weekend, and when I found my mother lying quietly on the sofa, her face gaunt and her eyes sunken with exhaustion, I knew I had no choice. I decided to put my studies on hold, put my violin dreams on hold, and return home to care for my mother. Olivia, who had just received a prestigious scholarship to a jewelry design college in Los Angeles, was at her own crossroads. "Mom will always need me more," she said, her voice soft but her eyes pleading. "This opportunity will never come again, you know that, right?" The words cut like a cold knife, but I smiled and nodded. Olivia died with the fierce approval of her mother, who insisted that at least one of us continue to pursue our dreams. I learned to coordinate medication schedules, take my mother to chemotherapy sessions, and play the violin in the living room on the days when she could still listen. Over the next 7 years, Olivia's appearances were sporadic. A few phone calls, brief weekend visits, bringing expensive perfume, silk scarves, and staged photos of her with my mother to post on social media. I learned to talk to doctors, read reams of treatment literature, and stayed up with my mother during seemingly endless nights of pain. The pressure was so great, the pace of life turned upside down, and I sought comfort in quick late-night meals. Sandwiches, chips, and fluffy pastries. My slim figure gradually disappeared, replaced by a fuller figure as the years passed. Every time Olivia returned, her eyes were always filled with scrutiny, accompanied by half-joking, half-serious comments like, "You should try this diet. Models in LA are crazy about it." I just smiled and let it go, even though my heart was in turmoil. 2 years ago, my mother passed away, leaving a deep void that could not be filled. Olivia flew back for the funeral, wearing an elegant black dress, smiling politely when accepting condolences. Every gesture practiced to perfection. I, on the other hand, was quietly immersed in loss and silent exhaustion. The next day, she left, citing work commitments, leaving me alone to clean up the empty house and handle all the paperwork related to the property. After that, I tried to piece together my life. I finished my college degree, found a job teaching violin to young children, and gradually reconnected with old friends. My weight hasn't budged, a clear sign of years of silent sacrifice. But I'm learning to love myself, even though society makes it incredibly difficult. 6 months after my mother's funeral, Olivia called with news that stopped me in my tracks. "You're engaged," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with excitement. "His name is Ethan Caldwell, a successful, influential businessman who is madly in love with you." I congratulated her sincerely, though I was familiar with the smugness that permeated the way Olivia talked about herself. What surprised me was that Ethan had been dying to meet me. "He's very family-oriented," Olivia said hesitantly. "He keeps asking about you." The engagement party was at a swanky restaurant in downtown Chicago. As I walked in, I felt out of place in the crowd of familiar faces from the fashion and business worlds, people who were clearly closer to Olivia than anyone else. Olivia greeted me with a quick kiss, introduced me to a few people, and disappeared into the crowd of well-wishers. I stood alone at the appetizer table, thinking of making a quiet retreat before anyone noticed. "You must be Emma," a deep, warm voice said behind me. I turned to see a tall man with soft eyes and a friendly smile. "I'm Ethan. Pleased to meet you." Ethan Caldwell was not what I had imagined. Not the slick, overconfident type Olivia had described. Despite his wealthy family and solid position in the business world, he carried himself with an uncanny, unassuming demeanor, a stark contrast to the glamorous facade Olivia had painted of her life. Ethan asked me about my violin, my education, and the years I'd left everything behind to be with my mother. He listened intently, without the distraction or awkwardness that many people had when I told stories about those times. What touched me most was the look of respect in his eyes when he mentioned my decision to sacrifice. "It takes a strong heart," he said. "Family is always the most precious thing." Olivia appeared suddenly beside us, taking Ethan's arm in a possessive gesture. "I think you've met my sister," she said, managing a polite smile. "She's wonderful," Ethan replied, his eyes sincere, patting me on the shoulder with the right amount of friendliness. Nothing more, nothing less, as if he knew the limits. Olivia's smile remained forced, but I caught a flash of emotion in her eyes. Perhaps annoyance, a hint of jealousy, or a flash of concern. I couldn't tell. Whatever it was, it vanished as Olivia took Ethan's hand and led him to meet some of the fashion heavyweights she'd been dying to impress. 3 months later, I received a wedding invitation. An exquisite one, matte ivory paper with elegant silver embossing, inviting me to what was supposed to be the most extravagant wedding of the year. Attached was a brief handwritten note from Olivia. "Ethan would love for you to be there. Call me to discuss further." The false warmth was evident in the calculated, curving handwriting. For a moment, I wanted to say no. Years of familial bias and tension had taught me to keep my distance as a defense mechanism. But the sight of Ethan, his gentle kindness at the engagement party, made me hesitate. Maybe, I thought, this wedding could be a new beginning. Who knows? After so many years apart, Olivia and I could bridge the gap and reconnect with what used to be called sisterhood. How naive I had been to believe that. 6 months before Olivia's wedding, I began to feel a lingering unease as my role as a bridesmaid forced me to see her more often than we had in the years we had lived together. Each encounter rekindled deep-seated differences and old wounds that had never had a chance to heal. The bridesmaid dress fitting became the first test. Olivia chose a high-end boutique in downtown Chicago where the dresses were available only in size 6s. I sat quietly, watching the bridesmaids, her close friends in the jewelry world, happily slip into the delicate silk dresses she had picked out. "We'll have to have Emma custom made," Olivia said loudly to the sales clerk as I struggled with a zipper that wouldn't close. She's not the typical body type for this. The consultant, a woman named Clara whose soft eyes belied her neat appearance, saw my confusion and said gently, "Actually, I have a few other designs that would suit her graceful figure. The important thing is the harmony of color and style, not necessarily the same." Olivia frowned slightly, but reluctantly agreed to let Clara bring a few more designs. When I emerged from the dressing room in an elegant A-line dress, fitted, flattering, and still in keeping with the spirit of the ceremony, I felt a little bit of my confidence return. "This is probably the best choice we've made," Olivia remarked, her tone deliberately trying to stifle my fragile, budding pride. Later, I sat with Lily, my best friend, in a small cafe, recounting the experience over steaming cappuccinos. "She's always like this," I said, stirring the foam, looking out the frosted window. "Whatever I do, it's never enough for her." Lily looked at me, her gaze as direct as ever. "Then why do you put up with it? You don't owe Olivia anything." I didn't answer right away. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had never really understood why. Maybe it was responsibility. Maybe it was the lingering memory of a mother who had wanted us to be closer. And maybe the last shred of hope that things would change between Olivia and me. "Maybe things will be different now," I said, though I still had a vague doubt in my heart. The bachelorette party a month later quickly dashed my hopes of any change. Olivia's friends gathered at the maid of honor, Claire, in her penthouse suite. A lavish space with elaborate floral arrangements and a gleaming wine bar that looked like it had been designed specifically for social media. I arrived early, intent on helping, but was only tasked with small tasks like folding napkins, while Olivia's inner circle handled the more important, high-profile stuff. When it came time to open the presents, Olivia put on a show, exclaiming with delight at each designer gift. But when she opened mine, a handmade notebook filled with carefully restored family photos, including a few precious ones of her mother, the excitement on her face all but disappeared. "How nostalgic," Olivia said, setting the book aside, quickly moving on to the next item, a set of elegant crystal glasses. Then as I was about to grab my bag from the bedroom, I overheard Olivia's voice coming from the nearby bathroom. Her voice came clearly through the half-open door. "I only invited Emma because Ethan insisted," she said. "Dad threatened to cut the budget if I didn't, and Ethan is so family-oriented. It's exhausting. She seems so ordinary." Another voice, Claire, I guess, replied, "I thought you broke up with her a long time ago." Olivia sighed, a sigh that was not hidden. "Every time someone sees us together, I know they're wondering how we're sisters. It's really awkward." I withdrew quietly, leaving my bag behind, and texted Lily, "I need ice cream. Quickly." That night, between the cold ice cream and Lily's knowing silence, I seriously considered pulling out of the wedding. Only one thing made me hesitate. The eager look in my father's eyes, who had always hoped that both girls would be present on the big day, as a complete family. And for that, I stayed. The rehearsal dinner carried a distinct tension, quiet but persistent, like an invisible string that tightened around my mind. Held at an upscale restaurant overlooking Chicago's Lincoln Park, the evening was supposed to be intimate, a final bonding moment before the big day. Instead, Olivia kept oscillating between being as cool as a stranger and projecting a fake older sister image whenever Ethan approached. "My wonderful sister," she said sweetly, putting her arm around my shoulders as Ethan approached the table. "I was just telling Emma how grateful I am to have you here to support me tomorrow." But as soon as Ethan turned to greet the other guests, Olivia dropped her hand as if it had never happened, then immediately turned to Claire, chatting animatedly about a post-wedding fashion event, where I was completely left out. What bothered me most was Ethan's behavior throughout the dinner. He seemed genuinely interested in making me feel welcome, always drawing me into conversations, asking for my opinion on decorating details, and sharing fond memories of Olivia in warm, sincere tones. His affection for my sister didn't seem forced, which only made me more confused by the strange contrast. The Olivia I knew wasn't someone who inspired such appreciation. What had she shown Ethan, when they were alone, that made him trust and love her so deeply? Was there another version of Olivia? One I had never known? I also noticed the quiet strains between them, small disagreements brushed aside with a forced smile. Olivia's slight frown when Ethan had been talking to someone too long, and sometimes, for a fleeting moment, the weary look that crossed his eyes when she asked for something more. These little details made me wonder about the true nature of their relationship. But I also knew, as clearly as the soft yellow light at the dinner table, that I had no right to enter the private world they had chosen to build. The morning of the wedding began with a painted blue sky, a stark contrast to the chaos of the bridal suite. Olivia had booked a lavish suite at Chicago's most exclusive hotel, turning it into a coordinating headquarters for the big day. Hairstylists, makeup artists, photographers, and assistants moved around like a busy theater troupe, with Olivia sitting at the center, quiet but commanding, as if she were running a universe that revolved around her. I arrived early as instructed, but for the first hour or so, my presence was all but ignored. When Olivia finally turned to look at me, she made a cool comment. "The makeup artist will probably need more time on you," she said, glancing at the dark circles under my eyes from a sleepless night. "And I hope you tried that massage I suggested, because you look a little puffy." I bit back a retort, reminding myself that this was her day, not mine. The makeup artist, a young woman with short dyed blue hair named Mia, looked at me with gentle eyes. She murmured a few soft compliments about my facial structure and bright eyes, surprising me with her simple kindness, almost believing that I actually looked good. Everything exploded like a scene from a movie when Olivia's custom-made veil arrived. She opened the box, paled, and then screamed as if she had witnessed a disaster. "This is completely the wrong design. This lace pattern is not what I chose." The wedding planner immediately retreated to a corner, dialing an emergency number, while Olivia launched into a panic so loud that it was hard to distinguish between genuine anger and performance. Years of caring for my mother had taught me to be calm in a crisis. I held the veil, examining every stitch, and although the pattern was slightly different from the original, the overall look was still elegant and graceful. "Let me try to adjust it," I said softly, stepping into a corner with good lighting. With my sewing kit in tow, a habit from the days when I used to patch up my mother's hospital gowns, I made a few careful adjustments, deftly reshaping the drape to frame Olivia's face. When I handed over the adjusted veil, the wedding planner let out a visible sigh of relief. Olivia eyed it skeptically. "It's not exactly what you ordered," she said, but let the hairdresser pin it to her head without further complaint. When Olivia looked in the mirror, even she couldn't deny the allure of the veil. The photographer snapped away, clicking away, admiring the way the soft lace caught the light perfectly. "It's okay," Olivia said, more a cool acceptance than a thank you. Over the murmur of the crew surrounding her, she leaned toward me and whispered a warning. "Don't embarrass me today, Emma. No need for any sentimentalisms or anything. Just keep your cool." The gentleness of the remark stung me more than I was willing to admit. Over the years, Olivia had seen me as more of a nuisance than a real family member. Part of me wanted to walk out of that room, to end the fake act of sisterhood. But then another part of me, the part of me that remembered the little Olivia who used to close her eyes and sing along to my violin, kept me going, urging me to stay and close the final chapter of this relationship. So I stayed, suppressing my feelings of exclusion as I often did, preparing to play the role of the bride's silent sister, knowing full well that in her new life, I would be but a shadow. The wedding venue, carefully chosen and approved by the Caldwells, was a work of art. An ancient building in the heart of Chicago had been transformed into a space somewhere between royalty and fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers glittered against a backdrop of towering white orchids and carnations, making one wonder if the city's flower shops had anything left. Handwritten invitations guided the 500 guests to tables named after famous fashion capitals, rather than the usual numbers. The air was filled with the exclusive scent that Olivia had commissioned for the big day, as if to put her stamp on every detail. I stood in the doorway, fully made up and dressed in an expensive bridesmaid's dress, feeling like an outsider. I was surrounded by Chicago's elite, fashion editors in their tailored gowns, businessmen in their tailored suits, and a few famous faces trying to keep a low profile while their eyes darted around as if searching for the camera. My father appeared beside me, dapper in his tuxedo, but his eyes were as awestruck as mine. "Here's my darling girl," he said, squeezing my hand with familiar warmth. "You look beautiful today, Emma." "Thank you," I murmured, grateful for his calm presence amid the pageantry. "Olivia has created a stunning scene." He nodded, but his expression was thoughtful. "Your mother would be mesmerized by all the glamour, but I think she'd be more proud of you." Before I could say anything, the team of coordinators with headsets rushed in, starting to rearrange the bride and groom. The ceremony opened like a carefully choreographed visual symphony, smoothly executed to the beat. Olivia arrived at the right moment, looking like something out of a fairy tale, resplendent in her custom-made gown, the veil that had once made her hesitate now shimmering perfectly under the carefully calibrated lighting. From my position in the bridesmaid line, I watched Ethan's face as Olivia approached. His expression was sincere and affectionate, but I caught a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, something only I could see. Olivia, on the other hand, had more contentment than tenderness, and her eyes occasionally glanced toward the celebrity photographer than the man she was marrying. The vows were spoken. Pretty, elaborate, but more formal than sincere, as if chosen to fit a media image than to come from the heart. There were no personal stories, no moments of emotional silence, just enough to keep the fashion reporters from cutting out anything. But when it was Ethan's turn to say his vows, his voice was so deep and sincere that the entire space seemed to freeze. The kiss that followed was choreographed like a movie, so perfect it almost lacked real emotion. The ceremony ended just as the string quartet soared into its crescendo, as if it had been timed to the last second. Olivia had realized the ceremony she had always dreamed of. Perfect, magnificent, flawless. As for me, I stood there, my heart wrenched by a mixture of emotions: joy for my sister's success, regret for the lack of sincerity, and the overwhelming loneliness of being alone in a ceremony that was meant to celebrate connection. As the crowd began to move into the reception area, the first thing that hit me was not the bustle, but a palpable sense of discomfort. Instead of being seated at the family table near the bride and groom, as I should have been, I was ushered to a table much further away, a gathering of less intimate relatives and names I'd only heard in passing, guests who weren't on the priority list. The message couldn't have been clearer. Despite being a bridesmaid by blood, I wasn't considered an important part of the perfect picture Olivia had painstakingly painted for her wedding day. I was ready to face an evening of awkward conversations with strangers when Ethan appeared beside me. At first, his usual politeness, then his gaze changed as he realized the situation. Without hesitation, he signaled to a moderator and said, his voice firm but calm, "Emma should sit at the family table, next to her father." The moderator paused, a little embarrassed. "Mrs. Caldwell was very specific about the seating arrangements," she said, as if expecting Olivia to be the final word. But Ethan was unyielding. "I believe my wife would like her sister to sit with the family," he said, his voice soft but non-negotiable. "Please reschedule." A few minutes later, I was invited to sit at the formal family table, where my father was chatting with Ethan's parents and a few important relatives. When I was seated, Olivia's gaze, which lingered on me, was not surprised. Her expression was too calm to be accidental. But with the cameras recording every moment and Ethan's gaze fixed on her, she could do nothing but give me a wry smile. "We're so happy to meet you," Ethan's mother, Margaret, said in a gentle voice. She was an elegant woman, her silver-flecked hair neatly tied in a bun, and her eyes were soft and warm, with a kind of warmth that reminded me of Ethan. "Ethan has told me a lot about you." I couldn't hide my surprise, and I raised my head slightly. "Really?" "Of course," Margaret continued, smiling. "He was impressed by your resilience and dedication in caring for your mother during her illness. Our family had experienced the same thing with a relative, Ethan's aunt." "It takes a strong heart to dedicate your youth to caring for someone you love." Margaret's husband, William, nodded in agreement, his eyes silently filled with appreciation. "That's something I admire," Ethan added, his gaze fixed on me without hesitation. "She's also a talented violinist." I felt my cheeks heat up, not used to such direct praise. That's in the past, I replied, smiling. I only teach lessons now, not official performances. You should play a piece tonight, Margaret suggested enthusiastically. I hear there's a beautiful violin in the cocktail area. I shook my head almost instinctively. Oh, I don't think that's appropriate. Olivia wouldn't like anything outside her schedule. I knew my sister well. Even a moment of shared spotlight was something she would find difficult to accept. From across the table, I caught a glimpse of Olivia's eyes on us, her brows furrowed. When Margaret stood up to greet an acquaintance, Olivia came over and sat down next to me, as if she couldn't wait another minute. "What are you doing?" she whispered, trying to maintain a polite smile under the gazes of the surrounding guests. "Dinner with my in-laws," I replied evenly, keeping my face neutral. "They're so nice." "This is no time for networking, Emma," Olivia snapped. "This is your wedding day, not your stage. Don't try to attract attention." The accusation was so absurd that I wanted to laugh, but I held back. I just sat where Ethan arranged me and chatted politely. "Just keep your cool," Olivia warned, standing quickly when she saw Ethan walking toward us. Instantly, her expression changed. Her smile brightened as if the tense conversation had never happened. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, his eyes darting between Olivia and me as if sensing something beneath the surface. "Perfect," Olivia replied, her voice sweet and unfailing. "I was just telling Emma how happy I was to have her at the wedding today." When one of the bridesmaids came to pull Olivia away for a group photo, I excused myself from the table, using the excuse of going to the bathroom. In the cold, luxurious marble space, I stood before the mirror, trying to recapture the confident woman that my makeup artist, Mia, had painstakingly crafted earlier in the day. But it seemed like she was slipping away from me, bit by bit. In the mirror, I saw only a familiar figure, my sister, always taking a step back, uncertain and pale in Olivia's shadow. My phone suddenly buzzed. It was a text from Lily. "Has the wedding hit rock bottom yet? Do you need me to rescue you?" I chuckled, though my heart still felt heavy as a stone. "Hard to say," I texted back. "Olivia is still the same, but Ethan is nice and his parents are nice." Lily replied, "Remember, Emma, you have value. Don't let her dim your light." The words were a gentle touch to an old wound, and exactly what I needed to leave the room with a new mindset. I would return to the party with composure, politeness, and sincerity. But this time, I would not let Olivia's insecurities define the experience. It was her special day, yes, but it was also my life, and I had every right to live it to the fullest. The reception was a perfect performance, where every detail was carefully calculated. The couple's first dance was like something out of a modern ballet, expertly choreographed down to the last detail. The moment of cutting the wedding cake seemed born to be photographed. The taste was just a sideshow. The gourmet food was presented like a work of art, making me hesitate to touch it while my heart was still churning. Olivia was radiant and charming, moving between the tables with a practiced grace. She smiled at the right times, posed perfectly for the camera, a living testament to controlling the gaze. At the family table, I tried to stay positive, smiling, chatting sincerely with Ethan's father and family. Seeing my father more radiant than ever calmed me down a little. Perhaps they sensed my quiet tension, because Margaret and William, Ethan's parents, tried to engage me in intimate conversation. They asked me about my violin teaching job, shared funny memories of Ethan's childhood, revealing the sincere and warm side of a man about to enter married life. As the plates were cleared and the wine glasses began to sparkle under the party lights, the host stepped up to the microphone, a professional smile on his face. "It's time to raise a glass to the happy couple." The best man, a close friend of Ethan's from college, was the first to speak. He shared humorous memories of his college days, interspersed with admiration for Ethan's sharp business sense and loyalty. Next came Claire, the maid of honor, with a speech clearly designed to be more viral than touching. She listed Olivia's career achievements in jewelry design and their lavish trips together, as if she were hosting a trendy vlog. Then, suddenly, the host raised the microphone, beaming, And now, a round of applause for the bride's special wish to her sister. Applause and gasps echoed around the room as if a sisterly moment was about to take place. Olivia strode up to the podium, her hair shining in the spotlight. I felt my stomach tighten, an old reflex I couldn't control, but I forced a smile, telling myself that maybe this time she was serious. Maybe it was the first acknowledgement, a small bridge across the distance between us. I want to take a minute to talk about my family, Olivia began, her voice a little measured, and especially my sister Emma. Her finger pointed toward me, and a bright spotlight suddenly fell on my table. The entire room turned to look at me at once, curious and expectant. Emma and I grew up on very different paths, she continued, her voice reminiscing. I pursued my passion in fashion, and Emma stayed home, helping my mother through her illness. A few nods, a few murmurs of agreement. I almost believe Olivia is actually paying tribute, stitching together a torn piece of our relationship. But then she continues. Of course, those years have taken their toll, she says, and her voice begins to take on a familiar tone, smooth but meaningful. Who could forget the energetic 15-year-old girl and Emma choosing to project herself as a devoted 40-year-old woman? She smiles slightly, a smile that encourages the audience to laugh along with her. A ripple of laughter rippled through the room as Olivia continued her story, her tones sweet and teasing. When she was little, Emma was always a sight to behold. Playing the violin like a pro, her grades always at the top. I used to be so jealous, she said, deliberately lowering her voice as if making a cute confession. But life has a way of straightening things out, doesn't it? Look at us now. She turned, gesturing with her hands, showing off her perfect figure in her haute couture gown, then glanced at me, in my simple but elegant bridesmaid dress. The shrug was almost involuntary, but the look was sharp enough to cut through my self-esteem. The room laughed again, the relieved laughter of people who thought they were witnessing a funny moment between close sisters, not a silent stab in the face. Emma didn't even have anyone with her today, Olivia continued, ignoring the obvious strain on my father's face. I tried to set her up with some nice people, but it seems everyone is busy doing laundry today. Another laugh, longer, louder, as if encouraged by its own malice. But I told you not to worry. There will be someone for you someday. Her words were like knives cutting through flesh, cold, precise, and all too familiar. I sat still, unable to react, unable to breathe, as Olivia continued her tirade of attacks disguised as teasing. It's funny how life leads us here, she continued, her smile bright but her eyes cold. A successful older sister and a well-behaved younger sister. The word well-behaved fell from her lips with a smooth irony. But that's family. You don't get to choose who you're going to be your sisters. You just try to love them, even if they show up to your wedding dressed like they're at a buffet. Tears welled up in my eyes. Too many to stop, too many to hide. All the painful memories came flooding back like a tidal wave. The teasing at school, the lonely evenings huddled behind the door, the small wounds that never healed, because they were inflicted by loved ones. I saw my father suddenly stand up, his face red with anger, but then he stopped, held back by surprise or by his habit of remaining silent when Olivia crossed the line. Margaret and William, Ethan's parents, sat like statues, their eyes exchanging quick, panicked glances. The divisions in the banquet hall were beginning to show. Some guests were still smiling innocently, while others were starting to look awkward, turning away, avoiding eye contact. Those who knew Olivia looked annoyed, but not really surprised. The strangers, unaware of our history, laughed along, thinking it was all just friendly banter between sisters. Olivia finished her speech with a perfect finale, raising her glass with calculated tenderness. This just goes to show that no one can have everything, but everyone should be content with what they have. Love you, my dear sister, she said, her voice as sweet as honey but as cold as steel. A round of applause broke out. Hesitant at first, then quickly building into a full-throated social reaction as people decided it was a kind congratulations rather than a clever public attack. Amidst the cacophony, I clutched my small bag and stood up, feeling the need to leave immediately, before the tears could spill. I couldn't bear another moment of this party, not wanting to meet the pitying looks or be forced into awkward conversations as if nothing had happened. As I stood, Olivia's eyes met mine from across the room. For a brief moment, I saw something in her gaze. Not regret exactly, but a dim awareness that she had gone too far. But the flicker was quickly overshadowed by the perfect smile she'd honed over the years. The smile she maintained as she bowed to the applause and returned to Ethan's side. He, who had been chatting absent-mindedly with a waiter throughout his speech, seemed only just beginning to realize that something serious had happened. I walked toward the door, head down, paying attention to every step, as if it were the only way to keep myself from collapsing on the spot. All I wanted was to leave, to call a cab, to go back to my small apartment where I could quietly face my pain and begin the process of cutting Olivia out of my life once and for all. No relationship, not even a blood relationship, was worth such pain. As I neared the door, the sound of the microphone clattering incessantly drowned out the murmur of dinner conversation. I paused, not sure what was happening, but my heart had begun to pound in my chest like something was about to burst. The room fell into a tense silence as all eyes turned to the front, where Ethan stood, microphone in hand, his face unreadable. I paused in the doorway, my heart still aching but my mind preoccupied with the question, what would Olivia's new husband say? Maybe a few familiar pleasantries praising the bride's beauty, to lighten the mood and get the party back on track. But I was wrong. Ethan stood there, his tall figure standing out from the crowd, effortlessly commanding attention. His usual friendliness was gone, replaced by a seriousness that took the breath away. His eyes swept over the crowd, then stopped on me, standing silently at the back of the room. "Before I say what I plan tonight," he began, his voice warm but firm, "I need to clarify something that just happened." Olivia's smile faded as she looked up at her new husband, her once perfectly made-up face showing her confusion. There was a murmur of dismay among the guests, along with confused and wary glances. No one could deny that the dreamlike setting had been broken. Ethan left the main table, walked toward the center of the room, and to everyone's surprise, turned to me and bowed slightly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice echoing through the silent room, "I owe you an apology." Nearly 500 heads turned to look at me, who stood frozen in the doorway. Frozen. My cheeks burned from the glare of the entire room, feeling as if I had been pulled into the center of the stage without warning. This was what Olivia had accused me of craving, the spotlight. "I should have intervened when the speech went too far," Ethan continued. "My silence made me a part of that hurt, and for that, I am truly sorry." Olivia's face went from confused to shocked. She was almost motionless in her chair, and Ethan continued, not giving her a chance to interrupt. "Many of you may not have known Emma Carter," he said, his voice growing warmer. "But I want to tell you what I know about her." He looked straight at the crowd. When her mother was diagnosed with cancer, Emma put her entire life on hold. Her studies, her dreams of becoming a violinist, her personal relationships, to care for her until the very end. For 7 years, she coordinated her own medical care, took charge of pain management, researched the latest therapies, and was there to support her, giving her mother dignity as she battled a brutal disease. Ethan said evenly, each word dripping with respect. His parents, Margaret and William, nodded slowly, their faces heavy with thought. My father, his eyes drawn back to an old pain, were now filled with tears. Olivia remained motionless in her chair, her face unreadable, as if her defenses were being stripped away. "I understand what that sacrifice meant," Ethan continued. "My sister Rachel also cared for my aunt when I was young. It was not a popular choice. It required more than time. It required self. But it was the noblest part of a person." He turned to me, his gaze softening, sad but steady. "Emma, the things your sister said tonight were harsh and unworthy. They do not reflect on you. They only reflect on the person who said them. I have held you in the highest esteem ever since I learned what you did for my mother." The room fell into a deafening silence. No clinking glasses, no shifting chairs, just 500 eyes watching an unforeseen moment. Olivia, Ethan turned to the bride, whose surprise had now turned to anger. I have known about your treatment of your sister for months. I have heard the snide insinuations, seen the flattering but sarcastic compliments, and I have seen the deliberate attempts to hurt her when she thought I was not looking. A wave of shock swept through the room. For a groom to expose his bride in the middle of a wedding, in the heart of the upper class, was unthinkable. Ethan stood straight, his voice low but clear. I had hoped that today would be a different beginning, that vowing to build a future together would awaken in you some desire to reconcile with your only sister. Instead, you chose our wedding day to humiliate her. Olivia shot up from her chair, her face burning red. Ethan, you're overreacting, she growled, just loud enough for the microphone to pick up every word. Today is our wedding day, Olivia said, her voice hoarse with emotion. Yes, Ethan replied, his voice calm but firm. A day that is supposed to celebrate love, family, and unity, and so I cannot let this moment pass in silence. In front of our friends and family, I am asking you to apologize to your sister for all the hurt you have caused her. Olivia opened her mouth, her eyes scanning the watching crowd before returning to Ethan. You can't be serious, she said. It was just a few jokes. Everyone laughed. They laughed because they didn't understand, Ethan said, his voice soft but firm. But they didn't see the venom behind the humor. But I did. Your father did. And my parents. Most importantly, Emma has always seen. Olivia's eyes darkened, narrowed with anger. You're ruining everything, she said, her voice thick with resentment. This was supposed to be the most perfect day of my life. There are more important things than a perfect wedding, Olivia, Ethan replied, his voice low. Like how you treat your own family, with respect and dignity. The tension between them was palpable. Guests were fidgeting in their seats as an argument broke out between the bride and groom in the middle of the wedding, something no one in high society had ever witnessed. Photographers hesitantly lowered their cameras, flustered by the unscripted situation. I stood there, numbed by Ethan's public defense, but also heartbroken at being at the center of such a public incident. Part of me wanted to leave quietly, let them work it out. But another, stronger part, a part that had lain dormant for years and had been ignored, wanted to stay, to witness the truth unfold. Olivia broke the tension with a forced laugh, as if reprising her role as the graceful bride. You're overreacting, honey, she said, forcing herself to sound calm. Emma knows I'm only joking. Sisters are like that all the time, aren't they, Emma? All eyes turned to me, waiting for a reaction that would be a verdict. In that moment, I felt all the years I'd endured the attacks in silence, always trying to soften Olivia's cruelty to avoid trouble. But this time, something inside me woke. Not anger, but a quiet, unshakable strength. No, Olivia, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Sisters don't insult each other in front of hundreds of people. That's not joking. That's cruelty. Olivia's immaculate face cracked, revealing genuine surprise for the first time at my response. Before Olivia could say anything, Ethan spoke first. I can't let this party go on like nothing happened, he said, his voice as sharp as a knife. I believe in facing the truth head on. Olivia, I'm asking you again. Apologize to your sister. Olivia's eyes darted between Ethan and me, her gaze flickering with consideration. No longer the happy bride, but the woman watching her plans for the big day go up in smoke. Her newlywed husband, who should have been there for her in this moment, was choosing confrontation over appeasement. The room was silent, the tension in the air as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the moment to burst. And when the answer came, it was Olivia as she was, tragic and unpredictable. I can't believe you're doing this to me, right now. She choked, tears streaming through her makeup. Without another word, she gathered her gown and turned to leave the room, leaving a stunned silence behind her. Ethan watched her disappear through the door, then turned back to the microphone. I apologize for interrupting, he said, his eyes on the audience, not avoiding them. Please continue with your dinner. He handed the microphone back to the master of ceremonies, who stood frozen, as if drained of energy, then walked toward me. As he approached, I braced myself for anger, or at least a reprimand. After all, my presence had just been the spark that set his wedding day ablaze. Instead, he stopped a respectful distance away, his eyes full of understanding, and said softly, "I apologize for everything that just happened, Emma. Could you spare a moment to talk to Olivia and me? I believe this is a conversation that should have happened a long time ago." I was a mess, tired, exhausted, and so confused that I wanted to turn and leave. But there was a rare sincerity in his gaze, and the memory of him standing up for me, right in front of everyone. I nodded softly. "I'll try," I said, "though I've been trying for years." "I understand," he said. "But sometimes it's the moments of crisis that are powerful enough to break old cycles." Together, we left the banquet hall, walking toward the bridal suite, leaving behind a chaotic scene and 500 guests who would surely have stories to whisper about for days. The elegant hotel hallway leading to the bridal suite seemed to stretch on forever. Ethan walked beside me, respectfully silent, as if to give me space to sort out my jumbled thoughts. I was overcome with a sea of emotions. Relief that Olivia's behavior had finally been called out, embarrassment at the public confrontation, and anxiety about the conversation ahead. "She won't take it easy," I said as I neared the door. Ethan nodded slightly. "I know, but easy conversations rarely change anything." He knocked gently. "Olivia, it's Ethan and Emma. We need to talk." "Go!" Olivia's voice rang out, choked with tears. I couldn't tell if it was genuine or an act. "Olivia," Ethan replied, his voice calm but firm. "We'll talk like adults. Please open the door." There was a moment of silence, then the lock clicked and the door slowly swung open. Olivia emerged, mascara smudged under her eyes, her wedding dress a little disheveled, but still looking naturally radiant. "How could you embarrass me like this?" she demanded of Ethan, completely ignoring my presence. "In front of everyone, on our wedding day." Ethan stepped into the room, motioning for me to follow. "I'm not embarrassing you, Olivia. I'm just solving a problem that needed to be solved." "By siding with her?" Olivia pointed at me, her voice full of contempt. "She's always been jealous of me, always trying to play the victim." Olivia's familiar accusations made my heart clench, but I fought to keep my composure. "Olivia, have I ever tried to steal your attention? Just once, please," I asked bluntly. "You're the one doing it right now," Olivia yelled, her voice filled with anger. "It's my wedding day, and you're making it all about your feelings." Ethan gently closed the door, giving her privacy, then turned to Olivia. "That's not fair, and you know it." He looked at her directly. "Emma wasn't trying to steal attention. You're the one who did this. Why would you say such cruel things about your own sister?" Olivia sank into the velvet chair, her wedding dress billowing out with every movement. "It was just a joke." She tried to defend herself, but her voice was shaky. "Everyone makes jokes at wedding speeches." "They weren't jokes," I countered gently. "They were meant to hurt you. What I don't understand is why, Olivia. Why do you need to put me down like that?" A flicker of real emotion crossed Olivia's face, a small crack in her perfect mask. She turned away, fiddling with the veil in her hands. "You wouldn't understand," she muttered. "You better let me understand," I pleaded, sitting down across from her. "We were so close, Olivia. What changed all that?" Olivia was silent for a moment, but then Ethan spoke for her. "Olivia, it's time you were honest, with Emma and with yourself." Olivia glanced at him in annoyance, but suddenly her shoulders slumped as if under an invisible burden. "They always loved me more," she said, her voice so low I could barely hear it. "Who?" I asked, wondering. "Mom and Dad," Olivia replied, her voice sharp and bitter. "They always loved me more. I was the perfect daughter. Responsible, talented, selfless. How could I compare to you?" Olivia's accusation was so contrary to what I had expected, I laughed in disbelief. "Olivia, that's ridiculous. Mom spent the majority of my time and attention on me. She was pretty much my biggest cheerleader. You were just a passing thought." Olivia raised her head, her eyes shining as if she had found something to cling to. Mom only cared about your looks and your accomplishments because that's all she thought you were good at. She never believed you had any real depth, but she always respected me. Dad loved me with all his heart. I was their pride. I looked at her, trying to reconcile her words with the memories in my head. Olivia, Mom loved you so much, she bragged about you so much. She bragged about your looks, the clothes you wore, the people you dated, Olivia quickly retorted. But with you, she talked about your character, your talents, your intelligence. Don't you see the difference? Ethan sat down beside Olivia, not touching her, but his presence enough to ease the tension. I think you're both looking at different pieces of the same picture, he said softly. From what you've shared, your mothers have very different ways of showing love to each of you. He turned to me. Emma, do you think Olivia might have been jealous of the respect her parents showed for your choices? Her concern for Olivia's appearance might have been superficial compared to her deep admiration for her character and what she accomplished. I nodded slowly, as my memories began to piece together in a new light. My mother's glowing praise of Olivia's beauty and social success contrasted with her quiet but profound recognition of me, and the separate expectations placed on each of her children. And Olivia, Ethan continued, can you admit that, from Emma's perspective, you got the majority of your mother's time and attention, while Emma often felt neglected? Olivia dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, her voice faltering. I guess I never thought about it that way. My sister Rachel had a similar experience with me, Ethan said, surprising me with this very personal sharing. The different ways our parents showed love created an unnecessary rivalry. It took us years to realize that we were both valued, just in our own ways. A heavy silence fell over the room as we tried to take in this new perspective. I thought about the years of hurt and resentment, all of which seemed rooted in deep misunderstandings and lingering insecurities. But that doesn't excuse what you said tonight, I told Olivia, my voice low. It doesn't excuse the way you treated your mother over the years. Olivia looked up at me, and for the first time that day, perhaps the first time in years, there was no calculation or drama in her face. You're right, she said, her voice simple but sincere. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. When Mom got sick and you stayed to care for her, I felt completely exposed. Your devotion highlighted my selfishness. I couldn't face seeing Mom weaken. I couldn't handle the medical details, couldn't give up my job. But you did. You did all the things I didn't have the strength to do. She turned to me, her eyes heavy and apologetic. I resented you for that, for making me look so bad by comparison. And then I resented you for making me feel guilty. It was so much easier to focus on superficial things, like my weight, the dress I wore, the fact that I was still single, than to admit that I'd abandoned Mom when she needed me most. Olivia's raw honesty left me speechless. She had never been so vulnerable or honest with me. I don't expect your forgiveness, she continued, her voice heavy. What I've done all these years can't be erased with an apology. But I'm really sorry, Emma. I'm truly sorry. Tears welled in my eyes, not from the pain, but from the sudden relief of finally being understood. Olivia, I never wanted to compete with you, I said softly. I just wanted to be your sister. I know, Olivia whispered, but you made things irreparable a long time ago. Ethan stayed silent, giving us that moment of connection. Then he asked softly, how do you two want to start over? Olivia looked at me, her eyes searching, and for the first time in her adult life, the balance of power between us seemed to shift. I want to try again, I said carefully. Not to pretend like nothing happened, but to move forward in a different way. Olivia nodded, a glimmer of hope on her face. Me too. She walked to the vanity, meticulously fixing her smudged mascara. Oh my gosh, you look terrible, she chuckled, her old Olivia returning. Actually, it's a fashion statement when you smudge your mascara, I said, smiling softly. Olivia looked at me in the mirror and laughed. A real laugh, not fake or malicious. One of my special talents, she joked. Then she got serious. We should go back before they have to send a search party, Ethan asked. Olivia took a deep breath, straightening up. I've spent my whole life building a perfect image, she said. Maybe it's time to try being more true to myself. And she turned to me, her eyes serious. Sis, I want to start by making a public apology to my sister. I shook my head. I don't need to. There's no need for an audience between us. No, I have to, Olivia said firmly. I embarrassed you in front of everyone, and I need to apologize to them. We walked back to the party together, Olivia standing between Ethan and me, ready to face the crowd. The room fell silent as we entered, the chatter coming to a halt as the guests noticed our return. Olivia stepped up to the microphone, her head held high and confident. I owe everyone an apology, she began, her voice calm and clear. Especially my sister Emma. She turned to look at me. What I said earlier wasn't a joke or false cheer. It was cruel and completely wrong. Emma has always been the strongest in the family, the one who stood up the best. I apologize for taking so long to admit it. The simple sincerity of her words was more moving than any flowery speech. My father wiped away tears as Olivia continued. If you're all okay with it, we'd like to continue celebrating this wedding and celebrate family, truth, and new beginnings. The party picked up speed. The guests began to process their unexpected emotions, while the band picked up the familiar tunes. Olivia came to me, her eyes unusually hesitant. Do you want to dance? She asked. Though a little shy, it was a start. As we fumbled with the music, Olivia whispered, It's weird, isn't it? It is. I smiled softly. It is, but good. It is good, she nodded, a genuine smile softening the hard lines on her face. Across the room, I saw my father looking up at me with a mixture of surprise and hope. Nearby, Ethan was dancing with his mother, both of them looking at us with encouraging eyes. For the first time in years, I felt a real connection with my sister. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. The wedding went ahead, its perfect surface rippled but unbroken by the revelations of that night. In those ripples, the real was finally allowed to emerge. A week after Olivia and Ethan left for their honeymoon in Hawaii, I sat alone in my tiny Chicago apartment, still trying to sort through the turmoil of emotions from the wedding. The public humiliation, the unexpected confrontation, and the hesitant reconciliation had left me exhausted, but there was still a glimmer of hope. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, her third since they'd left. Unlike the group texts of landscape photos, this one was directed at me. Still thinking about our conversation, trying to make sense of it all. Now that you're back, can we meet for coffee? Just the two of us. I looked at the text, sensing Olivia's effort to reconnect. She wasn't good at expressing her emotions or inner thoughts, so the fact that she was thinking about this was a big step. I'd love to, I replied curtly. Putting down the phone, my eyes suddenly stopped on the violin in the corner of the small living room. It was the only precious thing I allowed myself, bought with a portion of my mother's inheritance. The layer of dust on the case was a reminder that I had not touched it for joy for too long, only teaching. I carefully opened the case, wiped the dust off, and picked up the violin. At first, my fingers were stiff and clumsy, like someone who had not practiced for a long time. But then gradually, muscle memory awakened, bringing with it a stream of long-suppressed emotions. The pain of losing my mother, the resentment towards Olivia, and deep inside, the love of music that had been buried under the complexities of life. That weekend, I reached out to my old violin teacher, Mrs. Harper, who was now in her 70s, but whose passion for teaching had not waned. I want to take lessons again, I said, unable to hide my emotion. Not to perform professionally, but just to find my connection to music again. That violin has always been waiting for you, my dear Emma, she replied, her voice as warm as ever. It has never stopped being yours. Olivia and Ethan returned from their 3-week honeymoon, their skin lightly tanned and their faces glowing with happiness. The coffee date we had planned was approaching, with both excitement and anticipation. Would the raw, vulnerable moments of our wedding night remain intact, now that the grind of life had returned? Or would Olivia fall back into old habits, now that the emotions were less intense? We met at a small coffee shop not far from my apartment in Chicago. Olivia had chosen to come to my neighborhood, a rare choice rather than ask me to enter her glamorous world. She arrived in simple jeans, a light blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, a far cry from her usual polished designer look. "This place is really cute," she said after ordering, her eyes scanning the rustic interior and local paintings on the walls. "It's very much your style." "That could be a compliment or an insult, depending on how you interpret it," I replied, half joking and half examining. Olivia frowned. "It is a compliment, although I understand why you asked." She twisted her wedding ring around on her finger, a diamond that sparkled a little out of place against her otherwise plain outfit. "I'm trying to be more mindful of how I talk, how my words affect others. Maybe because of Ethan," she said, nodding, "but also because I'm trying to grow up. The honeymoon gave us time to talk a lot. And did that bother you?" I asked. Olivia chuckled. "I'm not used to having to open up so much. Ethan grew up in a family where everyone was honest. No one hid their feelings behind perfect masks." I smiled at her self-reflection. It must have been strange. "Scary, actually," she said, looking at me. "But I know it was necessary. I thought a lot about my mother, about you, about everything that happened." That conversation wasn't exactly a turning point. We still had awkward silences. We still had to deal with old wounds, and there were times when emotions ran high and we had to turn to lighter topics. Despite the awkwardness, something new had crept between us, a quiet but sincere effort to understand each other, perhaps for the first time since our childhood. When Olivia stood up to leave, she paused, hesitant. "Ethan told me I've started playing the violin again," she said. "Just for myself," I replied, a little embarrassed. "Nothing serious." "Ethan and I were thinking, if you wanted, you could play a piece at our housewarming party next month." "No pressure, of course," Olivia offered, her voice soft. The invitation took me by surprise. "You really want to play?" Olivia nodded. "I haven't heard you play since we were growing up. I'd love to hear you play." And 3 months after our wedding, our relationship had morphed into something I'd never imagined. Not exactly best friends, and not quite reconciled, but two sisters who were deliberately in touch, making a small effort to understand and connect with each other. Ethan helped, maintaining a neutral tone at family gatherings, gently intervening whenever old habits threatened to resurface. But over time, Olivia and I found our own rhythm, learning to embrace our differences rather than let them drive us apart. 6 months after our wedding, I gave my first public violin recital in more than a decade. A small recital for my students and their families. I sent Olivia an invitation, not expecting much. I understood her busy schedule, and part of me doubted that she would make time for such a simple event. But surprisingly, she arrived early, sat in the front row, and listened attentively to each performance of my students. When it was my turn, I played a piece by Debussy, one of my mother's favorite pieces. As the last notes quietly closed, I caught Olivia's eyes, sparkling with tears. After the performance, Olivia approached, her eyes no longer calm but full of genuine emotion. "That was wonderful, Emma," she said, her voice low but sure. Her usual politeness gave way to a rare sincerity. "Mom would have loved it." "Yeah," I nodded, my heart fluttering. "Mom would have loved it." Throughout my healing journey, my weight had not changed. I was still the same 14-inch figure that had been the target of Olivia's cruel taunts at our wedding. But something deep inside me had changed. Playing the violin had brought me back to my core, and healing with Olivia had loosened the chains of self-consciousness I'd carried for years. A year after the wedding that nearly tore our family apart, Olivia and I sat in my father's backyard, watching him grill meat while Ethan worked feverishly on a salad in the kitchen. The scene was simple, rustic, but filled with peace. "Did you ever think it would be like this?" Olivia asked, glancing at me meaningfully. I shook my head, smiling. "No way." "You've been mean to me," she said, her eyes unwavering. More than once. I wasn't innocent either, I admitted. I've been for a long time. I paused and looked at her. But it's different now, and that's what matters. Our relationship wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and times when we both fell into old patterns. But something new had emerged. The ability to recognize those moments and proactively adjust before they became scratches. Ethan and I had also developed a relationship of our own, a platonic friendship based on mutual respect and a shared love of classical music and books. He became the brother I never had, while remaining fiercely loyal to Olivia. I had also begun to open up to a new love, a music history professor named Michael, whom I met through the community orchestra. Michael appreciated every curve of my body, my passion for teaching, and my complicated family history. When I introduced him to Olivia and Ethan, I watched his reactions carefully, afraid that the old streaks of judgment would return. But Olivia spoke to him honestly, naturally. After dinner, she texted me, "He's great. I'm happy for you." That evening after dinner at my father's house, I sat at his old violin, the one where I had first played my first notes as a child, and let the music speak for me in ways that words could not fully convey. Olivia sat nearby, not performing, not comparing, not competing, just listening. "I see now why you love it so much," she said finally. "When you play, you become your true self, the person you've always been." "Music has always been my voice," I said softly. "Even when I'm not playing, it lives inside me." "I think that's what I envy the most," Olivia admitted. "You've always known who you are. I've always been searching." See it, and as I drove home in the quiet of the night, I quietly reflected on the journey of the past year. The wounds of childhood could not be erased as if by a magic wand. The years of Olivia's coldness, even cruelty, could not be completely erased after just a few months of trying to heal. But something had changed, deeply and permanently, not only in my relationship with my sister, but also in my own inner self. I realized that to stand up for ourselves, we sometimes need unexpected companions. That even if a family is locked into a pattern of trauma for generations, it can still be rewritten. That forgiveness is not forgetting, but choosing to move on. And most of all, I realized that my worth has never depended on Olivia's eyes or on anyone else's recognition. That value lives in the music that flows through me, in the unconditional love I have for my mother, in the strength I have cultivated to rebuild my life, and now in the courage to open the door to a new relationship with my sister. Imperfect, but true. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my violin case, sat in the quiet darkness, and played a gentle melody. The sound rang out as a silent tribute to the unexpected moment at the wedding that had sparked all the changes. Thanks to Ethan's courage to speak his truth, to Olivia's willingness to grow, and to the healing I found within myself, I realized that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in honesty. Not in hiding your wounds, but in letting them shape you. Not in winning over others, but in finding your own light. Have you ever gone through a painful family relationship and healed it? What led you to forgiveness, or at least understanding? Please share your story. Every healing journey deserves to be heard and appreciated. Because sometimes the deepest wounds are the greatest teachers. I am grateful for the opportunity to share this journey, and I remind you it is never too late to start over, with others or with yourself.